It's ad break time. I am proud to announce that the Beyond Solitaire podcast is sponsored by Central Michigan University's Center for Learning Through Games and Simulations. On October 1st, they will be launching a new series called Art and System, which will be headed up by Tim Hutchings. The goal of the series is to showcase indie games and to push the boundaries of gaming. The first games to go to crowdfunding will be a revised edition of Liam Burke's Dog Eat Dog, Anna Anthropy's Princess with a Cursed Sword, and Timothy Kleinert's The Mountain Witch. This is a fantastic initiative that I am personally excited to support. Also, if you want to help me keep the lights on over here on the podcast, you can support me at patreon.com/beyondsolitaire. For now, though, let's get on with the show. Hey, gamers, this is Liz Davis from Beyond Solitaire, and this week on the pod, I have a very special guest. This is Liwanag Burke, and he is the designer of Dog Eat Dog. So how are you doing today, Liam?
I'm great. Thank you for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, I'm super excited to talk to you. So I remember when Dog Eat Dog made a splash a while back. So for people who don't know anything about the game, how would you describe it to them? What is Dog Eat Dog?
Oh, geez. Dog Eat Dog is a story game about imperialism and assimilation. All right, that's more or less what it says on the book. So it's a game. You have most of the players play natives who live on the island. One player plays the occupation, and you guys just take turns telling scenes to describe kind of how things play out. And there is a token economy, which kind of interprets the events taking place in the game to control kind of how people can move forward, what options they have, and eventually what happens to the island based on kind of the choices you make and how you react and engage with the actions of the occupation.
Yeah, it's I think the thing that struck me the most is that it's a game about rules.
Yes.
And whether or not you get so frustrated that you break them.
Yeah.
So how did you end up with like I want to emphasize, this is not a game where like you have stats and you can just roll dice and win. That's not how this is constructed at all. And so the game is kind of founded around like a set of rules. What made you decide to do that? And just kind of explain how that works for people who are listening for the first time.
So yeah, Dog Eat Dog is built around the one like document in the game is the rules, right, which describe essentially the relationship between the occupation and the native people. And the starting rule that's in every game is the natives are inferior to the occupation. And then at the end of each scene, after you've kind of played it out, the native players decide on how to create a new rule based on the events that took place in the scene. What did the occupation encourage? What did they punish? What are they trying to teach, right? And so the rules end up being a document that describes the ongoing relationship, right, between the occupation and the natives. How I came to discover that, I wish I could say more clearly how I decided it. It kind of came to me, really, like as unhelpful as it is. I was working in Oakland. I was working in the port of Oakland at the time I wrote this game. I was moving cargo, not personally. I was the coordinator. And I was kind of going through my own self-realization about my experience as a Filipino American, that I'm Filipino American. I'm half Filipino. And I grew up and went to a school that's kind of structured around assimilation, about kind of learning to be assimilated, to be part of the American structure, and to adapt so fully that you kind of abandon some sense of like what it means to be Filipino, right? You think, oh, I'm just American, right? Or whatever. And so this was when I was like in my mid 20s, I started to kind of really question, like, how is it that I am Filipino, but I don't speak Tagalog? I don't really understand Filipino cultural practices. I feel so disconnected from what it means. And I was kind of having a little bit of what is in scholarship called the Filipino identity crisis. Apparently it's not. It turns out that there are papers written that I'm not the only assimilated Filipino American who goes through this kind of experience. And as I was kind of trying to grapple with what does it mean and why did I become so assimilated, that's when I kind of wrote the game. So I think in that sense, and I realize this is a very long answer to your question, that the rules structure is just a reflection of how I understood the experience of developmentalist colonialism, of assimilation, of being in a structure and trying to learn from that structure what behavior is okay, what behavior is not okay, and in kind of figure out if you're willing to adopt that to make it part of who you are or not, right? I mean, in a sense, you can kind of think of like when kids are interacting with a video game or a system or playing outside. I think the basic kind of level of learning is all often about this kind of, I take an action, I look at the response, I find out what happens, and then that is the new rule. That's the rule of the system I find myself in. And so in that sense, I guess the rules kind of model how I think about how everyone is trying to understand and navigate systems that they're finding themselves in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it really does actually. And I guess I wanted to ask then, how did you come to visualize the system this way? Given that, I read some of the previous interviews that had come out from you, that you kind of use this game as a way to start talking to the person in your life who would have the most personal experience, which is your mom. Like, how did you eventually, I guess, talk to her about these issues? And then where were you kind of getting your understanding of system and narrative, if not from her?
That's interesting. In terms of talking to my mom about it, that's a tough one. We didn't always talk about it. In fact, it was kind of only when I went back to college recently that we talked more about her experience of what it meant to be Filipino. And of course, it's interesting. I think of myself as Filipino American. I think of my mom as Filipino American because she is American. She came to America. But I mentioned that to her a couple of years ago, and she said, "No, I'm not American." Right. And so it's an example of kind of how that generational space, we have just very different ideas about certain experiences, right? My mom, ultimately, even though she's lived in America for 40 years, she still considers herself fundamentally Filipino. So I guess it's just little things like that of trying to, like I said, this is kind of the beginning for me. This was the beginning of the process of trying to figure out what it means to be Filipino American, right? And how we kind of integrate the structures of like, I am part Filipino, right? I'm part white, but it's not meaningful in the American context, really. I'm an Asian settler, right? In Hawaii, I've also come, I was also in the mainland where being Filipino is understood very differently than it is in Hawaii. And so in moving back and forth between these different contexts, just trying to figure out what it means to be Filipino. And then going back and talking to my mom, who has a very different view of it. But I remember I was in a class 2 or 3 years ago now, I think. And we were talking about the developmentalist model. I mentioned that before, that the Philippines relationship to America is developmentalist, that America is developing it. We call it a developing country, right? And the thing about a developing country is it's perpetually developing. It does not develop. It isn't done developing because that would end the relationship, right? And so America wants to help develop the Philippines. Sorry, this is getting pretty political already.
Do it. That's what this podcast is for.
America wants to develop the Philippines, but it doesn't want the Philippines to become developed, because then it would be at the same level as America. And so it's perpetually in this subordinate place relative to America. And I was mentioning this discussion to my mom while she was cooking dinner, and because we were visiting. And then in the middle of that, she turned around and just said, "Wow, you're right." Like, I never thought about that. And I was like, okay, well, I guess. So this is the value of a college education, I guess. Yeah, I'm sorry. What was the question again? How did I talk to my mom about this?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. You're talking about your understanding of colonialism and assimilation, and so the biggest possible conversation partner in your life, not necessarily an early conversation partner. So who were you in conversation with as you developed this game, and what kind of got you thinking about systems in that way?
So there is a person. So a person I talked to a lot about this stuff actually is Chris Chin, who is also Bankway on online, and I think on Blue Sky. Because we happen to live in the same building. We just coincidentally we're living in Oakland at the same place at the time, and playing some role-playing games. We played some indie games together. And I remember specifically, and I hope he doesn't mind me mentioning this, a conversation we had about this where he said to me, we were talking about race, and he said to me, I don't 100% trust your judgment on race. And I was, of course, like, tell me more, right? What do you mean? What's wrong with my judgment on race? I'm a person of color. You're a person of color. Why do you have doubt of my judgment? And he said, well, it seems like everyone you know is white. Which is which was accurate. Like that, my girlfriend at the time was white. Most of the people I hung out with, most of my close friends were all white. I kind of, even though I went to UC Santa Cruz and I lived in Hawaii a long time, I almost all of my contacts, the people I interacted with, were white, and so that was a big kind of moment of like a little bit of a shattering of a illusion for me, maybe, of being like, why is that? Like, not even like, oh, that's terrible, but more like, why did I make this choice? How have I in my life decided to kind of only surround myself and interact with white people when I easily could have chosen otherwise? And so that was a big part of thinking about, like, what does it mean to be assimilated? And why have I, what processes acted on me to kind of encourage me to be this way, and to go back and think these ideas through, I guess. So I would say Christian is this game probably wouldn't exist without me talking to Christian about race stuff, because he helped me kind of realize that I was what I was missing, right?
Yeah. So this is also really interesting to talk about because, especially if you go back and look at reviews of Dog Eat Dog, the perception of the game is that it's extremely brutal, kind of upsetting as a game.
Yeah.
So we can get to the actual coverage, but before you release the game, how much did you play test it, and how did you feel about like what you were seeing in action when you played?
I played this a ton. I think I wrote it, actually, it might have been 2006 that I wrote it. And then it actually didn't come out until 2011, right? Or 2012, one of those years. I don't know. The original version I wrote, structurally, it was pretty close to what came out. I had some more aggressive component. When I originally wrote it, as I recall, I gave the occupation more GM fiat power. Secretly, I think of this game, we kind of are like, oh, it has all this, people look at us, it has all this unusual system structure. I think that Dog Eat Dog is basically how role-playing games work. That's my truth. I think people are like, oh, well, you just said you don't roll dice, you just talk things out. Well, most of the time when you were playing a role-playing game, you talk things out. The vast majority of stuff that you put into the narrative, you don't actually roll your strength plus d20. You just go, I'm going to go over here. And everyone else goes, yeah. All right. The vast majority of role playing is done by consensus. And so I just wrote that in to Dog Eat Dog and just took out the other parts of it. Right. And similarly in that version, the occupation has in some sense, some aspects of GM authority, some structures of GMness, right? They provide the opposition, for example, which is something that GMs tend to do. But in the original version, I gave them more power to overrule things, to say, oh, that judgment is wrong or whatever. I think I in the original version, when the occupation is engaging in judgment of the natives as to whether they followed the rules, they didn't have to explain themselves. They could just do whatever. And we playtested that, and the people in the playtest kind of said to me, you don't need any of this. The game works fine without all this like intentional unfairness of the rules. It's already unfair, right? And so you don't need to add unfairness into the mechanical, like, I'm trying to find the right way to put this. It is unfair in a mechanical sense because that's how the game is designed, but it doesn't need to be unfair in the carrying out of the rules sense that I like co-sign. Hey, it's okay if you just break the rules of the game in playing it. I don't have to co-sign that because I know you need to follow the rules and it still works. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does make sense.
And that's how that was the first playtest version. And the other thing about it I should mention is that the original playtest version was written much worse because I kind of wrote it in my like war game mentality. And so it was written in the kind of, in a war game, the rules are very specific. And if something is not said by the rules, then it's intentionally not said. And that means you can like drive a tank literally through that gap in the rules. So that's how I originally wrote the rules of Dog Eat Dog. And then in like 2010, I think, before I had actually started doing the Kickstarter, I gave it to my now wife, Sarah, right? And she read it and she was like, "This sucks." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she was like, "It's not intelligible to me. Like, I don't," because she's not a gamer really, not in the way that like I assume you and I are, right? Like,
Yeah.
she plays The Sims and like Warcraft 3 and like she plays games, but she doesn't sit down and read through Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition, right? Um, and so she said, "This is essentially not readable to me. Like, I don't understand what you want. It's not clear to me how to play the game from this." And so I was like, "Well, that was hard for me, right?" But I
She's a
was like,
keeper though.
"Okay." No, she was. Yes, we married for 14 years yesterday, actually.
Nice.
Um, yeah, and so I say, okay, well, so I took it out and I actually went and rewrote it literally line by line. Like no line of it, I think, exists in the finished version that was exactly the same as the original version. Because I just had to take it all apart and like, how do I write this so it's written like a human being? Um, and I will say people have commented that it's very legible. So I think again without Sarah also, and I think I put these all in the new acknowledgments. Without Sarah, the game would not have been successful because it was not easy to read.
So, we talk about your playtesting, you had rules. But for people who again who have not played this game, basically, if you are playing a native player, the
Mhm.
way to win is to never break any of the rules. Like you have to abase yourself so far in some ways, right? That like the opposition kind of gives up on trying to get you to break a rule.
I would
And
ask what it means to win, though. When you say win,
yeah,
you mean that's how you get the occupation to leave, right? The way to get the
yes,
occupation to leave is to continuously get the tokens from them. And to get the tokens from them, you have to follow the rules. And so,
yes,
yeah, in that sense. But I think that's where it sounds dumb, maybe. But I think Doggy Dog asked that question of like, what does it mean to win? Like, is it worth doing all this stuff to get the island back? Or is it more important to, and you see this in games for players to go, fuck this, I'm not going to follow the rules. I'm just going to fight back and I'm going to try to do the opposite, lose all my tokens, run amok, which allows me to violently respond to the occupation, destroy the occupation's narrated in resources and buildings and armies and whatever. Even if that means in the end I lose control of the island, but the narrative is more true to what I want.
yeah. I was actually going. You took
Sorry.
it exactly. No, you took it exactly the direction I want to go. Right, which is that yeah, like you could do that to win, but that sucks so bad. Like
Yeah, yeah.
how long do most people try to hold out in pursuit of victory? I feel like a gamer's game, but also it's such an emotional experience to sit there and just put up with something, even if it's fake. What kind of range of responses to that did you see in test?
I have seen a lot of. I've played a lot of, probably more than anyone in the world. Um, I think it's very variable, and it's definitely dependent on the starting conditions. It's very dependent on the scenes and the occupation's behavior. Um, I have played games where we wrote into the rules something like coexistence is impossible. It was something that intense. And that was how we interpreted the occupation's behavior in the scene, was to say essentially, sorry, like there's actually no way for this to work out in a positive way. And so you can
Wow.
imagine that everyone went amok in that game, like every player. Um, and in other games, I've seen players who are playing the occupation who clearly want to get along. They're like, no, we could try to make this work, right? Maybe they don't consider themselves an occupier in that sense, or maybe they just want to try it. And in those games, it's often more unclear, right? More players survive. More players that are like, yeah, these are rules I can live by, and they make it through. There's usually one or two people who are like, no, I really want to resist no matter what, no matter how nice you make the rules. I'm not willing to abide by the fundamental rule that
Right.
we're inferior, right? And so that's when you get conflict. But I would say it's very variable. It's very and the moment you understand it best is usually after the first scene. That is where players start locking in. Like that's where they start looking at the rules, looking at the judgment, and thinking about what just happened. Like I got judged, I lost a token for being not inferior enough, right? Or I got a token because I was inferior. And that's where they start really biting into that. What do I want? What does my guy want from this? What is
Yeah.
he willing to, or are they willing to accept, right? And so I don't think you really know until then, like how it's going to turn out. I've seen it go a lot of different ways.
Yeah. So one more thing, this mechanical I want to talk about from
Yeah.
the original game, which is the first, deciding who plays the colonizers. So it's decided by who is the richest person
Yeah.
in the game. What made you decide to do that?
Oh man, I don't remember the exact details. I did write in the author's note, and I think this is genuinely more part of it than I maybe want to admit. That I was playing. What game is it? I have to look now. Sorry, Full Moon City by Rainer Knizia. Right? You might have. I don't know. You do board games, right? So you might know it.
Yeah.
And he writes the most splendid player goes first, right? In the rules to that. And that was kind of the, a lot of Euro games they were doing, the tallest player, the player with the best electrical connection. I don't know, right? Like
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
love to do that. And it was just kind of a way to say, like, I don't really care who goes first. Figure it out. But I just enjoyed that idea. I liked that idea of like, we can just ask them to make any kind of judgment. And then I was also just thinking about like, and I think I put this too, that there's a lot of systems of power, right? And people are sitting down ready to think about, oh, we're going to talk about race. We're going to talk about colonization, and they've already kind of prepared themselves mentally to have that conversation. And so I was like, let's have a different conversation. Like, let's put something else out there and make them really think about power in a different way, right? As I think this is more like prominent and real, and in some ways, there's always going to be a richest player. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and I know, because I grew up, because I'm an assimilated American, I know they don't want to talk about it. So
No,
I
they
wanted to
do not.
see. I wrote that too. Like I have watched a lot of games, and generally people want to play exactly what the rules are, but this is the rule. People will instantly be like, "Let's not do this." They will be like, "Let's just see how much change we have in our pockets," or they'll be like, well, "Who has the nicest phone?" They'll do something that's a proxy maybe for wealth, but they don't really want to delve into the question. Which I don't. Again, it's once they bought it, they can do what they want. But I just think I think it's pretty interesting that people really they don't want to talk about it. So that's why I put that in. I want to challenge and say, privilege comes in a lot of forms, power comes in a lot of forms, and just because we're playing one kind of power doesn't mean that other kinds of power are not always salient. And also Reiner Knizia. He has to take some of the blame.
Yes, we'll blame him for everything
That's
bad
right.
and give you credit for everything perfect. Okay, so actually you just said something that I thought was an interesting way to approach this. So once somebody's bought your game, they can do what they want.
Yeah.
To what extent is that actually true for you versus like a flippant remark?
We're gonna get real into role playing theory, so I'm gonna try to restrain myself, or you might just have to cut wide swaths of this.
Oh
It might
no,
be
this
really
is a nerd
boring.
podcast. You can be as nerdy as you want.
Okay, so there's what's called. I'm kind of a hardline adherent of what is called the Baker Care principle. It used to be called the Lumpley principle, but I think Vincent Baker wanted us to call it the Baker Care principle, which is to say, the game is the series of interactions between the players, right? And so the text is necessarily related to that. Like if we're playing tic-tac-toe versus dog-eat-dog versus Dungeons & Dragons, our interactions with players are going to look different. But the text is not the interactions. It's just an informing force. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
like in that fundamental way, yes, I am kind of like the game is always whatever you guys do, sitting down to put stuff in the shared narrative. A role-playing game, story game is a game about making a story. And the story is the shared narrative that you guys all work together to build. And you have a process because people can't just yell out like, now there are dogs or whatever. Like now we're all cowboys. So there's a process of veto and consensus that we use to say, yes, that's part of the story. Again, that same kind of going back to the D&D thing. Like I said, I go to the tavern. Okay. There's always that sense of, is it okay if I go to the tavern? And everyone else goes, yeah, it's okay. So that's the Baker Care principle. In effect, consensus narrative is built. And so in that sense, yeah, once you're playing it, as long as you may want to play Doggy Dog, you bought the game, you sat down, you tried to play it. Whatever process you adopt to put stuff in the consensus narrative, that ultimately is the game, right? Now, if you do a bunch of random things that aren't in the text, then yes, at some point I might be like, well, why, in the nicest way, did you do that? And like, do you feel that that makes it a different game, right? But like broadly, it doesn't bother me that people want to sidestep like richest and things like that. It's like there's a subreddit called, I think it's called I Didn't Have Eggs. And it's about people who go to recipe blogs and they post, I tried this recipe, but I didn't have eggs. So I put in bran. I didn't like it. It's very branny. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
so that is literally the content of the whole subreddit is people going, I changed your recipe and I don't like it. And so that's kind of how I think about it. If you change the recipe of Doggy Dog, I'm fine with it. It's your game. You might find it doesn't work, right? You might find that the game is no longer very pleasant or interesting or tells much if you change it too much. But you know, people could do what they want. I don't know. It's harder now than it was because when I wrote it, I never thought. I never imagined people like today. I'm like, what if people buy Doggy Dog and they're like, yeah, I just want to play out like colonialism and be mean to people. It's going to be great. We're so awesome, right? So I didn't really anticipate that when I wrote it that I would be worried about that someday. But I don't think if you were a fascist and you bought Doggy Dog and played it that you would find it very much fun anyway. So that's okay.
Hopefully, it's audience self-illuminating.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you know, now that we've kind of talked a lot about Doggy Dog, what it is,
Yeah.
what it elicits for people. You know, when it was published in the couple of years after, it was a very splashy RPG. Like for me, it was one of
Thank
the
you.
very few that kind of was on my radar as a board gamer who maybe like plays D&D occasionally. Although I did just buy a bunch of solo journaling RPGs at Gen Con, so maybe we should
Nice.
all be but you know, what was that experience like for you? And then like I feel like we haven't heard from you in a long time. Like, where did you go?
What is that experience like? It was interesting. It was an interesting experience. I think when I wrote Doggy Dog that year, I went to a bunch of conventions for the first time. I went to a convention called the Allied Media Conference, which is a kind of a radical transmedia conference in Detroit, and that was a really amazing experience to kind of because the reality, even though I wrote Doggy Dog, and I think Doggy Dog feels pretty radical, when I wrote it, I was pretty mainstream. I was not exactly politically exploratory. I just kind of happened to hit on something that I will say is kind of real and people connect with because it was my experience that I was documenting. And so it was really revealing and educational to me to kind of connect with other people who had more radical understandings of the world. Understandings, I would say, that turned out to be more accurate than mine. And so that was a great experience. Going to Gen Con, obviously, was a fun experience. Gen Con is Gen Con, you know, right?
Yeah.
And then the last one I went through that year was IndieCade, right? Where I was lucky I won the IndieCade Impact Award that year. And that was a really interesting experience to have it in the exhibition hall, right? And to be around a bunch of other games that were not tabletop games and to be viewed in the same kind of structures as all these games that are on, you know, Steam that are like big, splashy, relatively splashy indie computer games, right? So that was a really interesting kind of moment, right, for me, I felt. And then I kind of, after that, and after there was like little pops of people noticing the game. But I do think things died down a little, and that's partly my fault, maybe, in that when I was writing Doggy Dog, I was not employed, actually, or I was mostly unemployed. But by the time, or rather, sorry, no, as I said, when I wrote it originally, I was employed. I was working in logistics. But when I published it, I was not employed. But by the time the Kickstarter was like out and I was trying to ship games out and sell them, I had gone to work for a game company in Silicon Valley. And so I kind of, at that time, it's 2012, my wife was pregnant, as I recall. Like we just found out. And so at the time I was like, well, I need to kind of pursue the option that is a guaranteed paycheck, even if it means I don't get to maybe do more artistic expression. And so I went on to work in games in Silicon Valley for several years. And that's part of why I didn't come back, partly because some of the game companies I worked for basically said, sorry, we have an invention assignment, so you actually can't write anything anyway, right? Because we would own it. And then just generally, like, I had work, I had stuff to do. We were raising a newborn at that, like, and it was just a lot. And so I didn't really get to go back as much as I wish I had. In fact, like, part of my regret is the other part of it is it just turned out that I wasn't well suited to trying to run a one person business in any case. And so after that, people wanted to buy a lot of copies of Dog Eat Dog, and I wasn't really prepared to do the fulfillment and organization that actually running a business entails. Like, it's not all just going on podcasts. You have to, like, actually, put the books and sell them and put them in envelopes and mail them to people. And I wasn't really prepared to do the real work, which I can now, like 10 years later, I'm like, yeah, I screwed that up basically. And, maybe I wish I had pursued it more. I think when I look around at, like, the tabletop industry, there are people who are very successful and there are people who are moderately successful. But the key thing that I would say about all of them is that they're prolific. They write a lot. They produce a lot of different games. They're trying a lot of different things. And the thing about Dog Eat Dog is, I think I kind of have first album, second album syndrome. Dog Eat Dog is my life story. I don't have a second life story to tell. And so it was just going to be a lot more work to tell another story, right? Not that I couldn't, like, write more games, but that was just a fundamental challenge. People were like, what are you going to follow this with? What else are you going to make? And I was like, the next thing I wanted to make was a board game about being a waiter, which I actually prototyped, but we played that a while. And people were like, oh, so it's about, like, the disparities in labor relations and the structures of power and capitalism. And I was like, no, I just think it's really interesting to be a waiter. That was it. It was just that I was a waiter, and I was like, wow, this would be a great game, right? That was the thought process. And so, like, it was just a lot of that, like, kind of not sure how to follow it and not sure where to go with it. And so it kind of became, I would say, I don't know what you call it, sleeper hit, a cult success, right? Because I feel like, as you say, like, at the time, people were like, wow, this game is going to change the world, right? Which was very kind of them. I don't think it did, unfortunately. That'd be great if it had. But it's still, every so often, every year, every couple of years, someone will pop up and be like, wow, I was just looking at Dog Eat Dog. This game is amazing. Like, people who are, in the industry, or people who wrote for game journalism or whatever, they would pop up. Like Shut Up and Sit Down. For me, that was, like, almost like a couple years after, right? And I was like, oh, well, okay, well, I guess this is probably it for Dog Eat Dog. And then that came out, and obviously there was a lot more conversation about it. So every so often, people will bring it up and be like, this game's still really important, which I really appreciate. But that's kind of the experience of it for me, is I feel a little like it was great in some sense, right? And people remember it, but it doesn't. Yeah, I think it's still a great game, but it's kind of settled down to that every so often kind of state. Does that? I'm sorry, I'm really bad at
no. This is actually great. And because it leads perfectly into the fact that, Dog Eat Dog is getting, like, a new life.
So that was the
old
deal.
dog learning new tricks. So
in 2016, so part of the deal is I couldn't do, like I said, I couldn't do the fulfillment effectively. I'm sure you will find online people who are still complaining that I didn't fulfill correct. I am sorry. You're right. I screwed up. It's my fault. I did get Mark Truman at Magpie. Eventually, we made a deal where he went through my files and did all the fulfillment I hadn't done. So I'm thankful to Mark and Magpie for handling that, because I felt bad about, like, I know things had slipped through the cracks. Again, it's totally, there's no real excuse. I just wasn't up to the task of trying to run a real business. And then after that, I kind of went ahead and put it on Drive-Thru RPG. I put it on Pay What You Want, right? And it was like in 2017, and Trump had won the first time, and I was like, this sucks. That was my view. Then also maybe that was a good time to make the game more available. Maybe people will find some use in it, and it'll mean something to them. So I put it on Pay What You Want, and kind of just was like, okay, now I don't have to worry about this anymore, if that makes sense. But that meant there was no print version at that point. I have still probably 1,000 copies under my bed right now, literally, because we just did a big print run, and there was only really one print run of the first edition. And it was just kind of like, well, I don't know what to do with it. I don't want to throw them out, but I also like I can't really do any more fulfillment stuff because it was just, especially now, my life is just more busy and complicated than it even was. So that's where it stood. I was like, okay, Dog Dog's cool, and people would be like, you gonna make another print version? And I was like, probably not. And sometimes I would call, like I would email like a distributor or something, and mostly people were like, yeah, I would be interested. But then it kind of fell through again on my part, just that I had so many other things going on. And so then this year, it was last year, actually, now almost a year ago. Yeah, I got an email from John Churt at Central Michigan University. And he was like, listen, I'm sorry. The first contact I got was Tim Hutchins, right? Who was working with John Churt. And they together were like, yes, we have a game press, right? We publish games that have scholarly value, that have artistic value. And we usually do newer games, peer-reviewed. And then we also wanted to do a series of games with kind of artistic merit that maybe, I wish I should have it in front of me to kind of say exactly what he said, but basically it was like games with artistic merit, not necessarily that were peer-reviewed, but are meaningful and have value. And so we talked to Tim Hutchins to curate this, and Tim Hutchins chose Dog Eat Dog, which is really nice. Thank you, Tim. And thank you, John, because I know John has said a couple times he loves the game too. It's amazing to me, again, there aren't that many copies of Dog Eat Dog out there. It's amazing to me how many people have one and they're like, this is it. Like, you know what I mean? You mentioned you have one. And
yeah, although I tried to open the PDF today and it told me the file was busted. And I was like, oh, God damn it. Like, at least it's
oh my God.
Well,
lucky for you, there is a new edition coming out. No. Anyway, so they contacted me and they're like, do you want to put it back in print? Do you want to reprint it? And I did. There are some things I wanted to change and edit, minor things, which we can talk about more a little later. But also just, I know that people would like a printed copy of it. And they essentially said, we'll do the work. You just have to get us the files. And so I was like, yes, let's do it. Like, I'm down. Obviously, I'd love for people to play it, and hopefully it gets a renaissance and gets another opportunity to find the same audience. But now with a fulfillment partner who can actually do the job rather than just me in a tiny apartment with 17 folders and envelopes from the post office trying to get it out there. And so, yeah, that was pretty much, they were both really nice, John and Tim. And John, we talked extensively, and he was basically like, yeah, we're super excited with Dog Eat Dog. We'd like to print it. We'd like to put it in our first installment of this curated game series, right? And so it's Dog Eat Dog. It is Princess with a Cursed Sword, right? By Anna Anthropy.
Yeah.
I'm gonna like, just very quickly Google, and then
Witch?
the Mountain Witch, yes.
Yeah.
Which are both, these are all games, I think, similar era-ish, I think, right? I knew Anna. I met Anna at actually the Allied Media Conference that I mentioned. And so it's nice to be kind of featured with her work too. She's great. And then the Mountain Witch, I know at the time, I remember, in 2005, I remember being on Story Game and reading about how exciting the Mountain Witch was and how interestingly it portrayed this conflict-oriented relationship between the characters, and that, trust is at a premium. And so it's pretty exciting to be kind of in that milieu, right?
Yeah. That's awesome.
And I think that's going up. I need to plug it. Sorry. I think it's the actual crowdfunding campaign is going up October 1st, I believe. So please, you can go to the website, you can follow it. And then when it goes up, please support us so we can print the book. I should talk about the edits. Can I talk about the edits?
Yes, I was going to ask. So I'm very excited. Like, when you do a new edition, there's always little changes. So what are the little changes that we're going to be seeing?
So the biggest thing is really a small thing, but it's almost those little details. And a thing I discovered with Dog Eat Dog playing it after I printed it, that I hadn't really anticipated. Like I said, when I first played it with my wargaming rules, I played it with a bunch of other story gamers, people who were used to, building reading the rules very carefully and doing all the little details of minutia of playing a role-playing game. And
Yep.
it turns out one of those details of making a role-playing game is coming up with names for things. And so I never had problems coming up with names for things. The game just says, come up with a name for the natives, come up with a name for the occupation, do it, right? Well, it turns out for normal humans, that's really hard. I didn't anticipate this. This is genuinely a thing I encountered over and over once the game got out to like a more normal, that sounds terrible. I don't mean more normal, but a less game familiar, a less comfortable with improvisation crowd is when I ask people to come up with a name for themselves, I come up with a name for the group, for a whole nation of people. They are like, wow, how because no one can do that, right? And it became over and over. I'd see games that actually kind of stall right at the beginning, just trying to come up with a name. When it doesn't even matter, I don't care I promise you, I don't care what name you use in your doggy dog game. It's not a big deal. But it's hard for people to be creative in the moment and like come up with something like that. So I wrote in an idea I think that someone had given me about everyone just put in a syllable and then combine the syllables and work it together. And so that's the big thing that I added is just this way to get past that detail. I'm trying to remember, there just were little details and things that I cleaned up in the piece. There was, I think, some stuff that was not clearly established. The other thing, I'm going to open it up while I'm having this conversation. Because the other thing I did definitely do is edit the author's notes a little. Not too much, but I wrote some new author's notes that are more, again, it's coming out in a different time than it did. At the time that Doggy Dog came out, we were living in the blessed complacency of 2013 and the faith in the long arc of history tending towards, moral advancement. And so it's in a different context now, obviously. And so I just wrote a little bit about that. I wrote a little bit about one thing that came up a whole lot we talked about, which has always cracked me up, which is that one of the big comments you get about Dog Eat Dog is that it's not meant to be fun. I kept getting that post like randomly in like Reddit comments or whatever, or like even it's kind of mentioned in some of the reviews, right? It's like, oh, Doggy Dog's not meant to be a fun game. It's meant to be a game that you experience, that you have this intense experience that changes you and blah, blah, blah. And I was kind of like, I do appreciate that because I understand what you're trying to do. Doggy Dog is meant to be fun. Please have fun. It's not meant to only be intense and stressful and change the way you understand colonialism. It is meant to do that stuff, but it is also just meant to be fun to play. And again, I think this is one where if you play it once, it's going to hit you. It's going to like impact you most intensely at that moment that you play it and you start thinking about these questions. You start getting challenged in ways maybe you haven't been challenged about before. But I promise you, by the 12th to 13th time you play the game, you're just playing the game. And it's okay to be silly. It's okay to play. We played the X-Men, right? We played, I think, Pokemon one time. That's a good one. You can play whatever, right? The game works. In some ways, I wrote this on Blue Sky. It's fun to put in traits that are silly or weird and let the game handle them because the game will treat them seriously, even if you don't. And that makes the story interesting in its own way to really put a spotlight on. What does it mean that you have that as a trait, that the Pokemon live in balls, right? They live in Pokeballs. Well, what does that mean to be a major aspect of a power relationship between two sides? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think it's fine to be silly. It's fine to take it less seriously, and it's fine to have fun. So I put that in basically because I don't want people to think they can't have fun. You should play it and replay it and try silly things and enjoy yourself. And I wrote about pessimism. So this is a thing I think about a lot with Doggy Dog in retrospect is I feel like, and again, this might be something that's changed somewhat recently. This is going to be interesting monologue.
Do it. Let it ride.
So when I wrote Doggy Dog, I hadn't gone to college. I had gone to college, but I hadn't finished. I hadn't really studied sociology. I hadn't really studied colonialism or ethnic studies or power relations in the way. Now I have a degree in ethnic studies, but at the time I hadn't really delved into it. Again, I was just trying to document my experience. Um, and I feel that there is a lot of material about colonialism that is like, we can be victorious, we can decolonize, we can construct new stories, we can go outside and overcome the structures of power that have imposed subjugation on us, right? Doggy Dog is not that, right? Because it was telling my story. And to me, Doggy Dog is a pessimistic game. It says, even if you win, you're going to be marked, right? And there's a good chance you will lose, right?
Yeah.
Or, you may be marked, you may be changed, you may die, in your revolution. That the revolution, again, when you run amok and you get to go and you have narrative control and you can blow up buildings, shoot down rockets, and do whatever, you die and you probably lose control of the island, right? And so I think Doggy Dog is about saying, partly, and I wrote this again in the new notes, it's not about winning, because you probably can't. And we shouldn't advance and start our mindset on, we are going to change. I can't be decolonized myself. I would not exist. Right. And so there's no point for me in thinking about what I look like if I was decolonized. We have to say, what does the future look like? We don't have to proceed along these pathways that have been created, and we don't have to make the choices that are most in acquiescence with the power structures. We may suffer. That's what Doggy Dog is about. We may face fear and pain and cost, but that's the choice that we're faced with. Like, Doggy Dog is a game about agency, and that's one of the things I think people react to about it. Is it's a game about colonialism where you play the natives mostly. Obviously, one person plays the occupation, but that the native choice is always centered. Even though the occupation has the power, the natives have the choice, and the natives are writing the story. And so that's the message of the game. It doesn't have to be about whether you can win. It has to be about what you are going to choose. Does that make any sense? That's what I wrote. Something along those lines.
I also love this take, because I was reading like just around on earlier commentary. It was always like, well, even if it's just natives who are doing stuff, the occupation's always there and they butt in, and it's about their involvement. And I kind of like hearing this flipped.
Yeah, I mean, that's intentional, right? Like, that is like, do you know, I'm sorry, I'm meme heavy today. Do you know the bird whisperer tweet? I think about this all the time.
No.
That is like,
this sounds
am
amazing.
okay. So it's
I love memes.
a bird whisperer. It's this, I don't remember what bird respecter. Sorry, it was a birds rights. It was a Twitter joke account that was a birds rights activist. Okay, I think hopefully that frames like what this concept is about. Okay, and of course it was also written in theory by a bird, and so birds don't speak English too good. And so the tweet that I think about all the time was, I feel uncomfortable when we are not about me. And that is essentially how the occupation is in Doggy Dog, right? Like, that's the structure of it. Like, it's not about the occupation until the occupation makes it about themselves. And I wanted to put that in because that's what the occupation does. It always becomes about them. It's always the person coming in and being like, no, how does this relate to me? Right. But I do think the story, you don't frame all the stories about the occupation. You frame most of the scenes about the natives doing things.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what the story is about. It's about the natives doing things. I mean, the occupation gets to set a scene eventually anyway, but most of the time, it's the natives making the choices that they want to make.
I like it. So, a couple questions then. So now that you've like got another edition of this game coming out, does that mean that you are now able to start designing more games of your own if you wanted to? And do you?
So, this month, actually, about next week, I am studying a PhD program in sociology.
Hell yeah.
That's what I thank you. Started pursuing. I went and got the bachelor's degree that I had never finished. And my professors were like, you have a great analytical mind for analyzing systems of power, which obviously that's hence the game. And you should consider a PhD. And so I did. And so I'm starting next week. And so I have to be honest and say, my focus right now is on figuring out what that means and what that looks like,
Yeah.
and writing about structures of race and power, probably specifically in Hawaii is my focus right now, because Hawaii has very unique structures of racial disparity that do not, they reflect the mainland, but they don't look like the mainland. That's a topic for a whole nother podcast. So I don't know how many games I'm going to write yet. I would like to write more games. I would, and certainly if this comes out and Doggy Dog does really well and people are really into it again, that might set the stage for me to have the freedom to do more games. But again, in the same way, I need to think about what those would look like. Like,
Yeah.
I've thought about maybe it's time to write. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just I wanted to circle back because you'd mentioned that you kind of want to make a game about being a waiter, and you felt like
Yes.
people had expectations of you based on Doggy Dog that weren't necessarily what you wanted. And so I
Yeah.
guess I wanted to circle back to that. You know, when you think about your future, it sounds like academically you know what you're doing and it's pursuing some of
Hope
those
so.
same notes,
Fingers crossed.
but
Yeah.
with different permutations based on where you live now. But as a
Yeah.
game designer, as an artist, um, how do you feel about Dog Eat Dog as your first game, but maybe not your last, and like how that will impact your future choices?
That's a good question. I would love to make more games. I have other ideas of things I've always wanted to do, and it's just one of those things that sits in the back burner, and maybe you work on a little, and maybe you don't. I have ideas for things that I want to pursue. They wouldn't probably look like Dog Eat Dog. They might look like examinations of other kinds of societal structures or systems of power. But also, the thing I would have to say is, I didn't plan to write Dog Eat Dog. I just wrote it like I was working. I really actually had work to do when I was writing it. And I was like, I need a break. I need to kind of channel my emotional like stress and also like find some space that's my own, right? And Dog
Yeah.
Eat Dog came out of that. And so, yeah, I mean, if I have to sit down and grind away at writing a 90-page thesis, then who knows what other game might come out of that process. Like, I don't know yet, but I would like to write more games if I can come up with something that is meaningful and expresses something, I think. And something also that is just like, I'd be happy also to make some games that they don't have to be like Doggy Dog. They could just be toys and show structures and systems that are interesting to explore. There are things I'd like to do. If I get, I don't know, fellowship, maybe I'll make some more games.
Let's from your lips to God's ears, right?
Yeah, right.
So this also kind of every question breeds more questions. So when we talk about games that are meaningful versus games that are just toys,
Yeah.
how do you feel about what games should be as a gamer? And then also, how does that impact your vision of yourself as a designer?
I should
Down the
go back
line.
and take back all of that. No, just kidding. But I do think like I said that games that are meaningful is games that are toys. Obviously, all games are meaningful in their own way. There's not a game that is just a toy. They're expressing something about the way the world is understood. Games are systems, and systems are structures of, I want to say, like ontology, right? And
Yeah.
so in that sense, they express ideas, some ideas, and necessarily some artistically expressed ideas about how the world is. Even like minor games, even like, I don't know, Candyland is expressing some idea about the experience of being a child, maybe, right? Like, and so there's no game that is just a toy, but there are games that I want to make that say less about. Let me talk about Lunch again. The game I wanted to make with being a waiter was called Lunch, because I think that's a really funny name for a game. And so again, yeah, people were like, "Is this game about labor?" And I was like, "No, the main thing I wanted to do with this game is express what it feels like to be a waiter. Everyone's waiting for you, for one thing, which is ironic given the name of the job. And you have to move around a lot. You have to get out of everyone's way, and you have to remember all this stuff. So I wanted to make a game. So I made a game where the overall round is timed. This is the thesis behind this game that never came out. Maybe someday. The round is timed. Your turn is not timed. You can take as long as or as little as you want. No one else can go until you go because it's a turn-based game. So every moment that's your turn, everybody else is staring at you because you're blocking them. So that was my experience of being a waiter that I wanted to capture. Is just you're always needing to hurry and take some action because no one else can act until you do. So things like that. So I said this game is a toy in some sense. It's a fun system. It's a system idea that is exploring, that you'd have to think about and like mess with in the ways that gamers like to do, right? But it
Yeah.
also expresses an idea about, well, waiting tables, right? And so I think every game is doing that, if that makes sense. And I don't think there are really games that aren't trying to express some concepts of the world in their own way. Does that respond? Is that
Yeah.
responsive to your question? Okay.
No, it totally is. Actually, so okay, I feel like I could just keep asking you questions. This is a
Yeah.
great conversation, but we're coming up on an hour. So I'm going to respect your time. However, I always ask a couple of softy questions at the end, and we'll see where they go.
Yeah.
So the first one is, what have you been playing recently yourself that is bringing you some joy or interesting you?
I don't know if I want to tell you, and I can't explain. It's hard for me to explain why I don't want to tell you. I'll tell you. I'm playing a text adventure from the 1980s called Gemstone.
Okay, I don't know anything about this, so I'm curious.
It's a game that I'm worried that someone who plays Gemstone, because it doesn't have that many players, is going to see this and they're going to know it was me. But it's a game. It's a role-playing game, essentially. Like, back in the day, in the 80s, we would log on to America Online. And in order to keep us paying, because it was paid by the hour, they had all these games. They had the Game Center, and they had games. And one of the things they had was MUDs, like text adventures, right? Massively multiplayer text adventures, because it's cheap to send text, right? And it's AOL, and they didn't have, everyone's on 55.6K modems, right? And so they have to do something you can send over a crappy ass modem. No, broadband didn't exist.
Yeah. I know that dial tone. I remember.
Yeah. So I played a lot of MUDs at that time in my life. Various, like some big MUDs, some pretty little MUDs. I played a MUD that was run by the guy who went on to design Star Wars Galaxies. It was an interesting time kind of in the world in terms of what games could do and what they look like. But then I went back many years later to play this game. To my surprise, it survived. It has a dedicated clientele, and it is pretty role play heavy for me. I mean, it's not all. There's players who just like to make the numbers bigger, but there's also players who want to tell stories, who want to design characters and role play. And I think maybe just because as you get older in my life, it's hard for me to organize real role playing game time. I'd like to, right? But like the last time I played a sit down tabletop role playing game with people was probably like 7-8 years ago, right? You just don't have the time anymore, and you can't find everyone's schedule. You can't fit it all together. And so this gives me a chance to role play kind of on my own time, and tell stories on my own time. And also when there's no stories, I can make the number go up as well. So that's really what I'm playing a lot of, as silly as it is. And you get to like just role play and tell a story and make a character who has personal problems, and then explore those personal problems. All right, that's what role play is all about, right? I've been playing that. I played a lot of Stardew Valley. I know that's a blast from the past at this point, but it's a game. My kid is 11, going on 12. And I got this game when they were 6. I was like, oh my God, let's play games together. So I bought a bunch of Switch games, right? And one of those Switch games I bought was Stardew Valley. I was like, you're going to love this game. It's all about farming. And they were like, this is stupid. They were like, this is boring. The graphics are bad. I was like, shut up. No, just kidding. But I was in my heart like, shut up, because I'm not a graphics person. I play roguelikes. And so I was like, fine, you don't like it. That's fine. Kids don't like everything. Sometimes kids don't like stuff. But then this year, randomly, because they're getting older and they're getting more into things, I saw them just sitting and playing the Switch, and they were playing Stardew Valley. It finally kicked in.
Yes.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, it's working. Next, I got to get roguelikes out for them. They don't make roguelikes for the Switch. Maybe they do a little. And so I was like, great, let's play. So they made they have a bunch of different characters. We played some multiplayer. We made a multiplayer farm to play together. And I played some to show them, like, because I like to play Stardew. It's difficult. It's really hard because I'm a dad, and this is my dad failings is it's really hard not to be like, you should do it this way, kid. Right. And so so that's where I had to channel that, because I was like, They'd go in the mine. I'd be like, "You're getting hit by the monster." They're like, "Let me play." I'm like, "Back up. The slime is gonna kill you." I was right. Slime did kill them, but it's still not good parenting. So that's something to work on for me. But part of that's so then I made my own character. I was like, I'll teach by example, which didn't work, but I do enjoy Stardew Valley. So we got to play together. So we played a lot of Stardew Valley together. I'm trying to play games to bond with my kid, find things they like. We played a lot of Kirby. They decided they watch video game streamers. They want a 100% Kirby. And I was like, that's a lot of percent. You understand? Because we've beaten Kirby and we had like 40%. So 100% is a lot more than 40%. Right?
that
You
sounds
don't need to do that
awful,
much to beat Kirby. They have this energy. They also wanted me at one point in the past because they used to just make me play games that they watched, and I played Yoshi's Crafted World, and we beat that. And they're like, now I want to 100% it. I want you to 1. Sorry, they didn't want to. They wanted me to 100%.
Oh,
And I was like,
okay.
no, I won't. I don't do that. If I beat the game, that is 100%. That's how I feel. But they have that 100% energy, so they want to. So we're playing through Kirby again slowly, because you have to 100% you have to get every single hidden Waddle Dee. You have to beat all the fucking, excuse me, all the
No, this is not the dice tower. You can say what you want.
beat all the like the weapon challenges and all that stuff, and it's like, oh my god! But that's what they want, so that's family time. So those are the things, mostly things with my kid. A lot of this ridiculous text adventure from the 80s. That's what I'm playing right now.
Those are going to be some amazing memories later, though.
I hope so. I hope they remember it positively and not, oh my god, this is just like when my dad yelled at me about the fucking slimes. Like, that's always the fear, right?
Nah. If they're still playing with you, it means they're having a good time. So
they are still playing with me. And I'm working on it. And I have lots more games now that they're into it. I'm kind of like, okay, now, great. I have this pile of Euro trash and like complex card games and collectible games. You know, all these games from like the like deep, like mechanically energetic board games that I want to break out for them. But they're kind of like, this is boring. And I can't really blame them. Like, because lots of adults say that too about these games. I'm sure you understand.
Sometimes I go to game night and my boyfriend is like, are y'all playing anything I would like? And I'm like, no.
No, this is really embarrassing for us because we made these friends at Lena's school and my kid's school who are other family members, other adults, right? We're like, oh my god, other adults, because we had moved to Hawaii. We didn't know that many people. And they were like, do you like board games? We love board games. And I was like, yes, I do love board games. Right? You can already see where this is going. So I was like, yeah, we're going to bring over Sentinels of the Multiverse. And we're going to bring over like, not Terra Nova, but the one that came before that, Terra Mystica. Right? And so I brought this stuff over and they were like, yeah, we meant like Monopoly. Right?
No.
And I was like, oh, we had very different ideas. I actually don't play Monopoly. Like, we had very different ideas about board games. So I tried to get that. I was like, play Sentinels of the Multiverse. And they played 15 minutes. They're like, okay, buddy, I see that you like this game. So that was a sad, disappointing experience.
That's tough.
My wife got me for my birthday the XCOM board game.
Yeah.
Okay, so we tried to play this game. Again, the relative interest level in complex mechanics, I want to go back to. Like, and we tried to play this game, and we couldn't get through a turn. I think we managed to spend all of our budget, like, immediately, and had no more budget for, like, fighters. Right? And I had not played it. By the way, XCOM is pretty complicated. That's my view. And we played the board game, but I think we immediately got invaded and killed by aliens because we had not correctly set our budget. This is a game where, like, setting your appropriations budget is a big part of gameplay, and you could easily fuck it up.
That's funny. Yeah, I've been doing well with my parents. So my parents they're gamers in the sense that, like, I watched my mom playing Wolfenstein as a child and she was cool with it. Like, I could stay up late.
That's amazing.
They used to bring back cards and dice from Vegas. Like, they would leave my brother, me, and my grandparents' house, and then they'd come back after, like, a lot of poker and blackjack time. And so, like, I learned hearts from them. So, like, they know how to play some games.
Oh, yeah.
But they don't want to play, like, XCOM. And so finding that middle ground, right? So, like, I've gotten them to enjoy Cascadia. That was a hit.
Nice. Yeah. I was
Um,
just looking at that in the store today, the other day actually.
we played Cat in the Box. So because they understand trick taking games, I was able to like make Cat in the Box intelligible.
Right.
I was really happy with that. And then Jungo, which is like a happy camper game. It's the same company that
Oh,
Trio.
I don't know that. I'm gonna look at that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a mix between Scout and like Linko. It's just like one of those little card games, little numbers. You're trying to beat other people's, numbers, and people can instinctively pick that up generally. And
Yeah, that
so
makes sense.
I've had success with those, but we're not getting anywhere near like, I work for a leader. I'm not playing root with my parents.
Right. Right. Oh man, we tried to play. Okay, this is terrible. Sorry if this is. You don't have to. You can cut this part if it's bad.
No, this is fun.
We played Root, and that was another game where I was like, oh, I was like, I just was like, my kid was like, oh, it's got cute animals. And I
Uh-oh.
was like, great, yeah, pick a cute animal, just play, do whatever you want. That's not how Root works, by the way. Like, it turns out like that's not the way you should approach Root, and they were really mad. Actually, it's not their fault. I had set them up like accidentally. They're like, because they played the cats. Of course, they love cats.
See, this is
And
gonna be
so-
your kid's core bad memory. Dad set them up. Really?
I didn't mean to. I didn't know that the cats were so like incremental focused. Like you have to build, make the right moves, and so
It will never be worse than the summer my grandfather beat my ass at chess every night for a month straight and didn't explain what I was doing wrong. He just like thought I would figure it out. Like
That's like the throwing your kid in the ocean like brand of trying to teach them games, right?
yeah. Oh man. And I was just too proud to say no. So like okay, so you've been enjoying games.
Yeah, right.
Oh man, and then your last softy question is just
Yeah.
if people want to track your work online, where do you like to be found?
That's a great question. And shoot. Okay. When is this gonna air?
I'm gonna air this about 2 weeks before the actual Kickstarter.
Okay. By the time you see this, I will have actually set up my website that I keep meaning to set up, but I hadn't done it yet. So you can track my work at my URL, liamliwanagburke.com. I'm going to do a second take in case I can't get that one. liamliwanagburke.org. It's one of those.
All right, awesome. And
Use
then
the good
so
one.
everybody just check the show notes. I promise we will get
Yeah.
back in touch and put the right one down there for you.
It's one of those. You'll figure it out. I'm gonna have it. I actually, it's on my to-do list to set this up. I just haven't done it, but I'm gonna get that together. You will be able to find links there to Doggy Dog, and I guess if you want to read some papers about racing in Hawaii, you can probably find some papers about racing in Hawaii there too at some point.
Fantastic. Liam, thank you so much for coming on the show. This is an absolute delight. I'm really excited for Doggy Dog to like be back in the world and for whatever you do next.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed getting to chat about this again. Like it's been so long since I got to talk about Doggy Dog, and thanks a lot for having me.
Awesome. All right, everybody out there, I can be found anywhere online as Beyond Solitaire. Please like, subscribe, ask questions, and most of all, happy gaming.